The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't the footprints or the broken lock. It was the smoke, a thin gray ribbon curling from my neighbor's chimney, on a lake where no one should have been living in winter, and definitely not in his cabin. My family has a small place way up in northern New Hampshire, the kind of cabin that sits on a pocket-sized lake and disappears into dark spruce and bare birch once the leaves are gone. In summer, you might hear laughter drifting over the water, but in winter, the whole basin turns into a white bowl that swallows sound. A handful of cabins ring the shoreline, most of them empty until spring, and on our side, there's only one other place. The isolation is part of why we love it. No traffic, no streetlights, no cell service. Sometimes a single bar will blink into existence if you stand on a particular rock by the woodpile and hold your phone toward the sky like an offering, but it never lasts. The nearest spot with reliable reception is a short drive back toward town, and when the snow is heavy, even that feels far. My wife, Kendra, and I decided on a last-minute winter week up there. Her new job started soon, my PTO was about to reset. It was one of those plans that forms in the space between a Tuesday night and a Wednesday morning, and suddenly you're loading an old truck with groceries, a dog bed, and too many movies. We hit the causeway just before turning onto the private road that threads through the trees to the cabins. The lake was frozen solid, weeks of cold sealing it flat and pale, with wind-blown drifts like frozen waves. I glanced left, expecting the usual emptiness. Instead, there were two men on the ice. They were sitting beside a picnic table, not a random table, my neighbor's table. He'd painted it years ago in bright, ridiculous colors, the kind of thing that looks cheerful in July and insane in February. It was supposed to be chained to a concrete anchor on his property because some fishermen had once dragged the previous one onto the lake and left it there like trash.
Seeing it out on the ice meant one of two things. Someone had cut the chain, or someone had taken the time to break the table apart and haul it. Then I saw the cabin. My neighbor's front door was hanging open. A porch light glowed in the afternoon like an eye refusing to blink. And that smoke, thin but steady, leaked from the chimney as if a fire had been going for hours. Kendra turned to me and asked, "Is he here?" He wasn't. He lived in Florida full-time. He hated the cold. He didn't come up in winter. That was a known fact, the kind of thing you could build a bed around. Before I could answer, two snowmobiles came to life right in front of his porch. Two riders swung their legs over like they owned the place. They didn't look surprised to see our truck. They looked annoyed, like we'd interrupted something. The machines lurched forward, skimming down the bank and out onto the ice. They headed straight for the two men at the table. In a few seconds, the riders had collected them, two passengers clinging behind each driver. All four of them tore across the frozen lake and vanished into the tree line on the far side, where an old trail system spiderwebs through state land. We sat there in the truck with the heater blowing and our dog whining softly in the back seat, watching the place where the snowmobiles had disappeared. I didn't feel brave. I felt late, like we'd shown up at the end of a movie and missed the part where you're supposed to understand what the characters are capable of. I told Kendra to unlock our cabin and start the stove while I checked the neighbor's place. I tried to sound casual, but my voice came out thin. The snow squeaked under my boots as I crossed the gap between the cabins. The cold had that bite that makes your nostrils stick together when you inhale. I called out, loud, clear, the way my father taught me to do when you approach a place in the woods. No answer. Up close, the door frame told the story. The latch area was splintered. Someone had pried it open with a bar, maybe a hatchet. A smear of resin-colored wood shone through the paint where the tool had bitten.
Inside, the cabin smelled like smoke, damp wool, and something sour underneath. It wasn't ransacked the way you see on TV. It looked lived in. Empty cans, food wrappers, cigarette butts pressed into a coffee mug, a pile of firewood stacked neatly by the stove like they'd been there more than a night. Two sleeping bags lay on the floor, unzipped, like the people who'd used them had stood up in a hurry. I took pictures with my phone, even though there was no signal. Habit, maybe. Evidence for later. Then I shut down the stove, because I wasn't going to be the guy who let someone burn the whole shoreline down with a bad chimney draft. As I left, I pulled the door mostly closed, wedging it as best I could against the busted frame. Back at our cabin, Kendra was unpacking. She watched me with that expression that asks questions without saying them. "Break in," I said. "We're driving into town, reporting it, then we're coming back." She didn't argue. That's one of the reasons I married her. She can feel when a situation is past debate. Town was small and gray in the winter light. We found the police station, filled out forms, and I explained the snowmobiles, the open door, the smoke. The officer, mid-40s, tired eyes, asked the right questions. "Any idea who it was?" "No." "You recognize the machines?" "No." "You have any way to call us from the lake?" Not really. His jaw tightened. He didn't like that answer. A cruiser followed us back out. The officer walked through the neighbor's cabin while another stood on the porch and scanned the tree line. They weren't panicking, but they weren't relaxed either. When I described the sleeping bags and the cooler and the cigarette butts, the officer held up a hand. "That's the thing," he said. "We're not seeing them now." "What do you mean?" "They're gone. Someone cleared out after you left." I stared at him, trying to fit the timeline together in my head like puzzle pieces that didn't want to lock. "I closed the door when I left," I said. He looked at the busted frame. It was open when we arrived. My stomach went hollow. The officer didn't have to say the rest.
If the gear had been there when I went in, and it was gone when they arrived, then someone had come back almost immediately after we drove away. Someone who had either been watching or had returned to check. The officer asked if we had seen anyone else on the road. We hadn't. He told us they'd patrol the area more often for the rest of the week, but he didn't promise miracles. The lake is a dead zone. Too much forest, too many trails, too few people. Before he left, he said one sentence I didn't repeat to Kendra until later. "If they're using snowmobiles, they can be on you fast. Don't assume you'll hear them in time." That night, I boarded up the neighbor's door with scraps from his woodshed and hauled the bright painted picnic table off the ice. The chain had been cut clean, like it had been snipped with bolt cutters. Kendra stood on our porch and watched the trees. "Do you want to leave?" she asked. I wanted to, but we'd been looking forward to the week for too long, and part of me didn't want to be chased off my family's place by 4 strangers on borrowed machines. "Let's give it a day," I said. "If anything feels off again, we're gone." In the dark, the lake looked like a black sheet of glass, and somewhere in the woods across it, an engine coughed once, then went quiet. The next 2 days were almost perfect, which somehow made everything worse. The sun came out. The sky went that hard winter blue that looks fake. We cooked big meals and watched old movies and walked the dog along the shoreline where the snow had drifted into soft mounds. For long stretches, the only sound was the pop of sap in the wood stove and the slow groan of ice shifting under pressure. But little things started to show up at the edges of our routine. A set of tracks behind our cabin that hadn't been there the day before. Deep boot prints that cut straight through the trees and out toward the lake, ignoring the natural paths. A cigarette butt half buried near our firewood stack, fresh enough that the paper was still stiff. A snapped branch at shoulder height that looked less like wind damage and more like someone moving quickly and not caring what they hit.
Kendra tried to brush it off. "Maybe it's the cops," she said. "Cops don't smoke and toss it in your yard," I said. She didn't reply. Midweek, cabin fever hit. We decided to hike to the old concrete dam at the end of the river that feeds the lake. It's an easy trail, one we've walked dozens of times, winding through hemlock stands and along a frozen, whispering channel where the water still moves under ice. The dam itself is nothing dramatic, a block of gray concrete with rusted metal hardware and a spillway that grumbles under the snow. But it's a marker, a destination, a way to spend an afternoon. We stayed longer than we meant to, letting the dogs sniff around, taking pictures, talking about the summer and who we might invite up. The whole time I kept listening for engines. On the hike back, about 2 miles from the cabin, we heard them. At first it was faint, like distant thunder trapped in the trees. Snowmobiles. That wasn't strange on its own. There's a major trail system out there. People ride all winter. But the sound didn't stay distant. It grew quickly, coming from behind us, lining up with the trail like it was aimed. Kendra glanced at me. "Are they coming?" I didn't let her finish the sentence. I stepped off the packed center line, pulled the dog close, and moved into the brush to give them room to pass. Standard etiquette. The machines rounded the bend. 2 riders. Full face helmets, black suits, no bright colors. They stopped about 100 feet away, engines idling, and just stared. Even with their faces hidden, the attention felt physical. They talked to each other for a moment, their helmeted heads tilting like birds. Then one of them raised a hand and pointed, not at the trail ahead, at us. The engine screamed. They shot forward, straight down the trail toward where we stood in the brush, snow sprayed. The wind of their passing slapped my jacket hard enough to make me stumble. Kendra jumped back and almost fell. The dog yelped and twisted against my arm. They blasted past, then stopped maybe 50 yards down, turned their machines sideways and looked back.
Something in me snapped, some mix of anger and fear. "Hey!" I shouted. "What the hell is wrong with you?" One rider lifted a gloved hand and held up a single finger. Then they revved again and disappeared down the trail, engines fading into the trees like laughter you're not invited to. Kendra's hand shook the rest of the walk. Mine did too, but I kept them in my pocket so she wouldn't see. We reached our cabin just before dusk. The lake reflected the last light in bruised bands of purple and gray. On the porch, the doormat had been moved. Not much, just enough that I noticed. I told myself it was the wind. But when I unlocked the door, I found the living room window unlatched. We never unlatched that window. Kendra wanted to leave immediately. I did too, but the truck was already half buried from the last 2 days of light snowfall, and we'd stacked firewood, unpacked food, made ourselves at home. The thought of loading everything in the dark with the woods pressing in felt like trying to sprint while someone has a hand on the back of your coat. So we compromised, in the stupid way people do when they don't want to admit they're scared. We decided to leave at first light. That night, the temperature dropped hard. The stove ran hot, the iron sides ticking as it expanded and contracted. The air outside turned so cold the trees seemed to creak in complaint. Around midnight, the dog woke us with a low growl. Not barking, just that warning noise that means he smells something he doesn't understand. I got up and looked through the front window. Moonlight turned the lake into a pale slab. The far shore was a ragged black line of trees. Everything was still. Then I saw movement, a single headlamp bobbing near the neighbor's cabin. Whoever it was moved with purpose, not wandering. The light clicked off, then on again like a signal. Across the lake, 2 dim points answered, farther out on the ice. Kendra whispered my name. I didn't answer. I was listening. A low engine note drifted through the cold. Then another. Snowmobiles. They weren't on the main trail system. The sound was too close, too aligned with the shoreline.
I pulled on boots and a coat. Kendra grabbed my arm. "Don't go out there," she said. "If they're at the neighbor's cabin again, we need to leave." The words landed like a slap because they were true. We packed in frantic silence, shoving food into bags, sweeping essentials into bins, clipping the dog's leash with hands that didn't want to cooperate. I kept glancing at the window. The headlamp was gone. Then, from somewhere behind our cabin, a crunch. Not the soft settling of snow, a deliberate step. The dog strained toward the back door, hackles up. Another crunch. Kendra's eyes were wide. Someone's there. I killed the lights, and we stood in darkness, breathing shallowly, listening. A third crunch. Then nothing. Minutes passed. Maybe 10. Maybe 2. Time stretches in a cabin when the only thing between you and the woods is a sheet of glass. Finally, the sound returned, an engine, close enough that I felt it in my ribs. A snowmobile swung into view through the trees behind our cabin, headlamp cutting white through the branches. It stopped at the edge of our clearing like it had every right to be there. A second machine followed. 2 riders, both in black. They sat and idled, staring at our dark cabin. Then one of them turned his head slowly, scanning, like he was looking for the exact spot where a person would stand to watch. Kendra pressed her hand over her mouth. I eased the curtain back an inch, just enough to see. The rider lifted a hand and pointed toward the lake. The other nodded. They gunned their engines and tore away, not toward the trail system, but down toward the ice. A second later, from the neighbor's side of the shoreline, a light flashed twice. Signal. Kendra whispered. They're coordinating. The plan to leave at first light evaporated. Whatever was happening wasn't waiting for morning. I made a decision that still embarrasses me when I think about it, because it was equal parts instinct and stupidity. We were going to cross the lake. The Causeway Road was the obvious route out, which meant it was the route they'd expect. But the lake, frozen thick, offered a direct line to the public access on the far side, where the main road ran closer. If we could get there, we might find a scrap of cell service or a house with lights. Kendra stared at me like I'd suggested we swim. In the dark? The moon's bright, I said, and the ice is solid. We've had weeks of cold. She looked at the window, looked back at me. Okay, she said, voice breaking. Okay. We dressed for the cold, layered up, grabbed one headlamp, a flashlight, keys, and the dog. I cracked the door and listened. Silence. We slipped out and moved fast, keeping low, cutting through the trees toward our small section of shoreline where the snowbank slopes down onto the ice. The moment my boots hit the lake, I felt exposed. Sound carries differently on ice. Every step made a sharp report, like tapping on glass. We hurried, headlamp off, using moonlight. The dog's nails clicked. Kendra's breath came in tight puffs. Halfway out, I heard it. An engine, then another, from the far shore. 2 snowmobiles emerged from the trees like predators stepping into an open field, headlights sweeping. They hadn't expected us on the lake. For a second, the beams passed right over us. Then one headlight snapped back. It locked onto us like a finger. The machine revved.
They came. Kendra ran. The dog ran. I ran with them, boots skidding, trying not to fall, because falling on ice at night is how you become a headline no one reads. The snowmobiles closed fast, their engines howling, headlights growing larger, the sound turning from distant to immediate in a way that made my body flood with cold adrenaline. Ahead, the far shore was still too far. To our left, the lake narrowed where the river channel cut through, an area where the ice can be thinner. I didn't want to go that way. But the machines were steering us. One came in from the right, hurting. The other stayed behind, pushing. They were not trying to pass us. They were trying to drive us somewhere. Kendra screamed my name. I grabbed her sleeve and yanked her toward the wider ice, away from the channel.
The nearest snowmobile swerved, spraying snow, and for the first time I saw the rider's face through the visor. Not a grin, not anger, just focus. Blank, intent focus. The machine clipped close enough that the handlebars nearly caught Kendra's backpack. She stumbled. I caught her arm. The dog barked, frantic. Then the ice beneath my left foot made a sound I'll never forget. A low, wet crack. Not the deep groan of settling ice. A sharp fracture. I froze. The snowmobile behind us also froze because the rider had heard it too. For half a heartbeat, everyone on that lake understood the same thing. This wasn't just a game. This was physics. The rider behind us veered away, afraid of his own momentum. The one on our right hesitated. That hesitation gave us a gap. We sprinted for the far shore, legs burning, lungs searing. The ice groaned again, but held. We hit the bank and clawed our way up into the trees, branches whipping our faces. The snowmobiles did not follow onto land. They stopped at the edge, engines idling, headlights stabbing between trunks. I heard one rider shout something to the other. Then the lights swung away. They left. We kept moving anyway, deeper into the woods, following the dim outline of an old logging road I half remembered from summer hikes. Eventually, through the trees, we saw a yellow porch light, a house. We stumbled up the drive like ghosts. An older man answered the door in flannel and confusion, and when he saw our faces, he didn't ask questions first. He just said, "Get inside." The man's name was Alan. He lived year-round in a small place off the access road, one of the few who did. His wife brought blankets. The dog drank water so fast he choked. Alan listened without interrupting while I told him about the neighbor's break-in, the intimidation on the trail, the headlamp signals, the chase on the ice. When I finished, he nodded months, slow. "You're not the first," he said. Kendra's voice came out rough. "What do you mean?" Alan looked toward the window as if expecting headlights to appear at any moment. "Every winter, somebody thinks the empty cabins are free," he said. "Kids, drifters.
Guys running something they don't want found. Mostly it's just theft. But last year, a snowmobiler went through the ice near that river channel and never came back up. State wound it off as an accident." My mouth went dry. "You think it wasn't?" I asked. Alan shrugged, but his eyes didn't. "I think the lake doesn't crack there unless you know where to push it," he said. He called the police from his landline. Real signal, real connection. The dispatcher promised to send someone. While we waited, Alan went to his garage and came back with a metal box. Inside were photos. Not printed family photos, Polaroids, old and yellowing, and newer glossy prints too. Pictures of the shoreline, pictures of tracks, pictures of the neighbor's bright painted picnic table sitting out on the ice in different winters, like it had become a marker people kept returning to. "I started documenting it," he said, "because nobody believes you if you don't." One photo made my stomach twist. It showed two snowmobiles parked at the edge of the woods, headlights off. In the foreground was the river channel area, darker ice cutting like a vein. And beside it, a thin line scratched into the snow, an arrow pointing toward the weak spot. The officer arrived close to dawn. He took our statement again, more seriously this time. He drove us back to our cabin in a second cruiser so we could get the truck. The lake looked harmless in daylight, blue-white, smooth, empty. But when we reached the shoreline where we'd run, we found the fractures, a spiderweb of cracks radiating from the river channel, some of them fresh enough that water had seeped up and frozen into glossy black seams. The officer crouched and ran a gloved finger along one of the seams. "This is new," he said, "but it's not random." He stood and stared across the lake to where the snowmobile tracks faded into the far woods. Kendra hugged herself tight. We loaded the truck in a kind of stunned quiet. Every creak of a branch made my shoulders jump. The dog wouldn't leave Kendra's side. Before we left, I walked over to the neighbor's cabin one last time.
The boards I'd nailed across the door were still there, but someone had written on them. Not with paint, not with a marker, with something sharp. 3 words, carved so hard they dug through the wood grain. "Stay on shore." The officer photographed it, jaw clenched. "You didn't do this," he said. I shook my head. On the drive out, the causeway felt longer than it ever had. The trees leaned close. The lake kept pace beside us, silent and flat. At the last bend, where the private road meets the main trail access, I saw something bright in the snow. A chunk of painted wood, blue and yellow, my neighbor's picnic table colors. It lay like a breadcrumb, placed there deliberately, as if to say, we can move whatever we want, wherever we want. Kendra didn't look back. She stared straight ahead until we hit the first patch of cell service, and her phone chimed with a rush of missed notifications, like the normal world suddenly remembered we existed. The police later told us they never found the riders. They checked a few cabins. They interviewed a couple of locals. They logged it as trespassing, harassment, and suspected burglary. My neighbor replaced his locks. He installed cameras. He swore he'd never leave the place unmonitored again. But what sticks with me isn't the cracked door or the stolen firewood. It's the way those snowmobiles moved on the lake. Not like reckless kids, like hunters who knew the ice and knew exactly where it would break.